Awesome. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Emily, and I'm an Osmosis Nursing Regional Lead. And today I'll be our host for today's YouTube live stream Q&A. Today I'm here with Dr. Rena Malik, and we are going to be discussing social media creation and healthcare education when it comes to building a health education brand. So, Dr. Rena Malik, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, I'm Dr. Rena Malik. I'm a urologist and pelvic surgeon. I also have a YouTube channel where I make content on urologic and sexual health education. And it's really, truly an honor to be here. I want to just start the live by saying the recommendations and opinions mentioned in this live are mine alone. And I want to thank YouTube Health for sponsoring this event and providing funding for this event.
Awesome. It's so nice to meet you. So we have a list of pre-listed questions from other users on other social media platforms. So we're going to kick it off with our first question. So first we have is, how did you become a content creator?
Yeah, so actually it was sort of a circuitous journey. It was not something I had envisioned for myself. I was really passionate about what we call health literacy, so people understanding healthcare. And this came from one of my patients. So when I was a trainee and a resident, I took care of a patient who had bladder cancer, and we did a beautiful surgery on her. And part of the surgery was that she would now have a little stoma or hole on her belly that she would have to put a catheter in to empty her new bladder. And, this was part of her post-op care, was that she would have to put a catheter in multiple times a day to empty her bladder. And she did great after surgery. She went home, but she kept getting readmitted over and over again. And what we found was that she didn't realize that she had to actually catheterize herself to empty her bladder. And that's why she kept getting sick. It was just such a simple education that she had missed and that we had failed her. Even though we did the most beautiful, perfect surgery and everything technically went great, the patient didn't understand what they needed to do. And that was when I realized that, especially as a surgeon, but any of us in the healthcare field, we only have so much time to spend with patients. And half the time you're overwhelmed with the information we're giving you. So it becomes very difficult to take it all in. And so I wanted to offer a place or a way for people to understand their conditions, their treatment options, the risks and benefits in a much more easier way. And so that sort of over time led me to creating content on YouTube to help people understand their conditions, the options, and the things they're getting, especially on social media now, full of misinformation sometimes, and trying to debunk some of that misinformation.
Yeah, that's awesome. You make such a great point when it comes to like healthcare education, making it so easily accessible for people.
Mhm.
Awesome. So our next question says, I think being a sort of influencer is kind of tough, but how do you balance being a healthcare professional and managing your time with both roles?
Yes, it is very tough. So I think if you want to be a content creator and take it seriously, you sort of have to make it a part-time job, which is very difficult because you already have a full-time job. So when I started, I really learned how to be efficient because there's no way to do it all unless you are very efficient about it. So what that means is being efficient in terms of like how you could spend hours researching, you could spend an hour researching. So sort of really being cognizant of your time and not letting it go, into the weeds for too long. And then also being efficient at work. And so that was part of it, is being very efficient at my job so that I could get home in time and still have quality time for my family and my friends and my hobbies, but also then being efficient at content creation and also not being a perfectionist. I may not love the way I say every single thing in every video and every line. I may wish I had redone that differently or said that differently. But at the end of the day, it's just me talking. And the message, as long as the message is clear and the message is good, that's what matters to me. And I think that was really the key, is being efficient and then not being a perfectionist.
Yeah, definitely having that work-life balance between the two. Our next question says, what sources do you get your information from?
Yeah, so I mostly use peer-reviewed literature. So I look on a multitude of databases like PubMed, Google Scholar, where you can find peer-reviewed evidence. I also use guidelines. So if we have American Urological Association guidelines or European Association of Urology guidelines, those are essentially really rigorously created with groups of experts and with a review of the literature and a very intensive review. And so they've already done a lot of the work to tell us what is evidence-based, meaning what is accurate, up-to-date, scientific based in with high levels of evidence data to provide that information. And so I think that's really important, and that's a really great source. And then of course, going back to sometimes just our textbooks, because when I'm trying to explain a pathophysiology of something, it's helpful for me to go back and review some of those things at times.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely so much knowledge when it comes to being in this generation, but I love how you include all the data when it comes to like evidence-based practice. Our next question says, what equipment do you use in when it comes to social media creation?
Yeah, so when I started, I used my phone, which I'm using right now. So I used my phone, a window, and no mic. So I had nothing. Now I can tell you right for this live, because through the phone, I just have this $20 mic that I bought online, so super cheap. But I've sort of upgraded my content. So I have multiple lights. I have two lights here. I have a light behind me. And if you guys are watching, we're going to be releasing a course, or if you're watching this in the course, you'll actually have seen exactly what kind of setup I have, and I go through it in more detail. But essentially, I think the point that I'm trying to make is you can start with whatever you have. You don't need to invest a ton of money in a lot of content, a lot of equipment, because there's a lot out there and it can be very overwhelming. And as you decide to really make this a full-time, or a real enterprise, so to speak, of creating content, then you can start investing more into stuff, right? Because then you're just sort of buying stuff for the sake of buying it if you don't know how to use it or where you're going to use it. So I have a very unique setup. When I started making content, I made it in one side of my room. So I needed it to be really compact. So I couldn't just buy the big things that the YouTubers buy, because I didn't have a full room for a studio. So I bought things that I could attach to a desk, and sort of had to be very specific on what things they bought. So I'd say be cautious in just buying everything that everyone recommends, and really think about your specific needs and what you're looking for.
Yeah, definitely. When you're balancing that work-life balance, you have all these equipment that you could get, and it's more expensive, but then you're able to do it so freely and accessibly with your phone, like you mentioned. I,
Especially if you're a trainee, like funds are not unlimited, right? So your
yeah,
phone is great. It makes wonderful content. I mean, I think the quality of my video is pretty good right here. And the quality of my audio is pretty good. And I've invested, well, I had a phone, and this is $20, and you could use any light. It doesn't have to be an expensive one. As long as it's a relatively bright light, it's going to give you good lighting.
yeah, exactly. That's such a good point. Okay, our next question says, how did you decide on which content to begin filming with?
Yeah, so I think, it's based on my expertise. So when I did experiment, though, when I started. So in the beginning, I did interviews with other urologists. Then I moved to making content on overactive bladder, which I was really seeing a lot of patients in that area initially. And then I started really listening to my audience and saying, what questions are in the comments? What do they want to learn from me? And I realized very quickly that my audience wanted to learn about sexual health. And so ultimately, that is where I took my content, is what do people want to know, and what resonates when it comes from me with my audience, because it's going to be different for every single person. And so that's really where I went with it. And I think always listen to your audience, because that's who's watching you.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many questions that we could ask as like an audience, and being able to have that information helps you grow it as a content creator. All right. Our next question is more related on patient privacy. So it says, how do you balance sharing healthcare information with patient privacy?
Yeah, so I'm not a lawyer. I'm going to preface this by that. These are my opinions, but essentially, we take a clause. We use HIPAA in all of our sort of we take an oath to do no harm, and we also follow HIPAA, which is the Health Information Patient Portability Act, which basically protects patient privacy. So that has to be a part of your content creation, meaning you should never disclose any patient health identifiers, which means their name, their date of birth, or anything that even could link back to them, their race, their anything that could be identified for them specifically. If you live in a small town, even saying like the person's age and race could be enough to make them identifiable. And so ultimately, you have to be very thoughtful. And I always say, get permission. So if you're going to share like any sort of information, whether it's because you want to learn or you want to share a case or whatever the case may be on social media, you want to get permission, ideally written permission. And I would implore everyone to go to their own institutions and find out what the rules and regulations are. They may have a consent form or a way to get permission from your patient. And then also disclosing that you've gotten permission on the social media content is always sort of good practices.
Yes, that's so good. And then similarly along the lines, someone asked, can you film inside a hospital or an OR?
Yeah, so that again, talk to your own institution or wherever you are. Some places will have a strict do not film on premises, and some will be more lax. But I think this is sort of a gray zone. Again, consult your institution, consult a lawyer if you prefer. But I think ultimately, there have been some backlashes where people say, why are you filming an OR where you should be taking care of patients? Or why are you just making these videos when that's a place of, of where you take care of dying patients. So I think you have to be very thoughtful when you're creating content because it can be misconstrued at any point in time. So always sort of be cautious, talk to your institution, talk to your lawyer, and then use your own professionalism and the way you want to present yourself. Always think about it. If your content were to be on the front page of the New York Times, would you feel, proud of it? And if you're not, then you shouldn't be making it.
Yeah, definitely. That's such a good point when it comes to social media in our generation, where there's so many different factors that we should consider, and maybe that's something that normally maybe someone wouldn't consider, but so educational that you brought that up. So our
Mhm.
next question says, I know you mentioned this is our video for content creation, but someone asks, what disclaimers do you need to disclose in your content, and when and where is the best time to do that?
Again, this is my personal opinion. You should always consult with a lawyer or your malpractice if you are practicing in any form, any way, shape, or form. But generally speaking, you should include some form of disclaimer. I personally include it in my description, and I say this is for general medical educational purposes only. There's no doctor-patient relationship being formed. You still need to consult your healthcare provider before doing any treatments, and you should always seek counsel. And so I think it's really important to have a disclaimer. Some people put it in their videos before the video starts. Some people do it in a variety of different ways on podcasts. I've heard it in the beginning of podcasts. So again, I think there's different ways to do it. You should absolutely have a disclaimer that this is for general medical educational purposes and you are not providing medical care on the internet or medical consultations to patients.
Yeah, definitely. Everyone has a different own case by case scenario, so definitely take health education wisely. Our next question says, how did you promote yourself and how did you start gaining an audience?
Yeah, it's consistency. There's no secret sauce in terms of doing it. It's just showing up and doing it over and over again. And then, in the beginning, when you're making content, it's about finding out the areas, what we call search engine optimization, the areas that need information that patients are asking, or people, not patients, that people are asking questions about and finding out and putting out answers to those questions. So that's initially sort of the strategy you look at. But then again, it's being consistent, looking at your audience is questions. And in the beginning, it might be one or two questions from your audience because you won't have a big audience, but really just keep trying and don't be afraid to fail. Like just keep doing it. And some of your content will not do well. Some of your content will be very unliked, and that's okay. You just sort of learn from it and move forward.
Definitely, that's such a good point. Okay. Our next question mentions video editing. So, what did you do about video editing, and do you do it by yourself or do you have help from others?
Yes. So in the beginning, I will be very transparent. I did it myself and it was a lot of work, but I was sort of in the phase where I wanted to learn every part of content creation. So I made my own graphics, I edited my own content. I did all of that myself in the very beginning and probably for the first 50 or so videos. I mean, it was a lot. I did a lot of it myself. And then I eventually hired an editor. But I do recommend hiring editors. I think if you are making content and you are obviously the brains of the content, it already takes so much time to research and then create the content that should be where your energy and focus goes towards if you have the funds to hire an editor. Now, if you don't, then you can absolutely edit your own content and it's totally doable. You can learn as we are here on YouTube, you can learn how to edit content on YouTube. You can learn how to do all those things if you so desire. But again, I would recommend if you have the funds to hire an editor.
Yeah, I'm highly impressed. That's amazing that you were able to do all those in the first 50 videos. It's so
Yeah, I'm just an insane person.
amazing. All right. Our next question says, how did you secure sponsorships?
Yeah, so in the very beginning, I didn't secure any sponsorships because my goal was not to create a big platform. It was really just to create content. And I didn't want to have any sort of conflicts of interest, as we call it in the medical world. So I didn't really take any sponsors very early on. In fact, for the first, I would say, 4 years, I took very few, in fact, probably not even any, like very, very few. And the reason being is I wanted to be able to create content without influence. And then as I grew, sponsors reached out to me, and I will say I say no to the large majority of them because I have to believe in the product I'm promoting, and it has to be evidence-based. And so if it doesn't meet those two criteria, then I won't promote it. And I think that's really important. The take home is to always not rush into getting sponsorships, but really find sponsors that you truly feel aligned with and you believe in their mission and what they're providing. Because you are a healthcare content, I mean, you are a healthcare provider. And so what you say holds a lot more value than another influencer for perhaps. So in that way, you have to be very thoughtful. Now, of course, creating content comes at a cost. And so you do need ways to fund those costs. And so I don't think that it's improper to have sponsorships. But again, I would implore you to seek counsel at your employer and find out if this is okay before you do it, and maybe talk to a lawyer. Because these are things that will vary individually from person to person, depending on where you're employed.
Yeah, that definitely is a good point because you're showing this genuineness of your brand, being able to say like, okay, I also support this, and this is maybe something my audience would support as well.
Mhm.
Okay. Our next question says, how did you get around language filters and shadow bans when you have to mention terminology that's considered quote unquote inappropriate?
Yeah, I think it's actually sort of challenging, but there is the way that YouTube works, at least to my knowledge, is that they have an automatic review of your content. So initially they'll review your content with automatic means, and so they may flag it, but then you can go back and have it re-reviewed. And so that can be a helpful way, is if you upload your content early enough, you can get it re-reviewed before and make sure there's no ongoing content. But of course, being very thoughtful about the way you present things. Like I talk about sex, right? But I'm not putting videos that are vulgar on my content. And I also don't show visuals of genitalia or anatomy that's genital related on my channel. I show animations or drawings because that's less concerning and will less likely be shadow banned. But I think it's very individual to what you're doing. So I would always say try to upload it early, get it reviewed manually if you are concerned, and kind of go from there.
Yeah. Was that something that took some time when you first began your channel?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It was sort of like I didn't know this right away, and I think I sort of figured it out as I went.
Awesome. Okay. Our next question says, do you use different social media platforms or is your main focus only YouTube?
I use a lot of social media platforms, but I will say my main focus is YouTube, and I think that's a good thing to think about, is where is your focus? Because if you dilute your focus too much, it becomes very difficult because you're catering to very different audiences. So I have Facebook, I have Instagram, I have TikTok, I have X, I have Threads, Pinterest, and like I've tried them all, and I think what I found that, at least I enjoy about YouTube is making long form content. And so it's a great place for me to make long form content. And I've really enjoyed it. And I know that that's really where my expertise lies and where my skill lies. But, I still experiment with shorts. I put them on all the platforms. And I see what does well. And then, I also learn my audience is different on different platforms. The age demographics are different. The gender breakdown is different. And so that's really important to sort of look at when you're making content on different platforms.
Awesome. Sounds good. Our next question says, is it better to start off creating a podcast or creating content like an influencer?
Again, totally dependent on what you enjoy. Now, I think that there's no right or wrong answer. I think if you find that you can be consistent with a podcast, then that's what you should do. If you find that you can be consistent with content as an influencer, then that's what you should do. But it really should be based on your passion, because at the end of the day, content creation can be rather isolating, right? Nobody's there with you. I mean, you can hire people to come and do your lighting and do your sound or whatever, but ultimately you're the one creating the content, right? And um, so it really is sort of like you have to have your own intrinsic motivation to continue. And in the beginning, it's all exciting, it's really fun, and then you have some growth and it's really fun. And then sometimes that growth slows down or things are not moving as much, and you sort of decide, like, this is so much time and energy and people aren't watching it. And it can be, very difficult at times. And I think it's important to realize there's ups and downs for everybody. Nobody is on a high all the time. And so it's really important to just find something that gives you passion and excitement. Like, I love learning new things about urology. I love reading the literature. So for me, making this content is so fun because I get to really do this deep dive into the literature and share this content that is so meaningful to so many people. And it drives me. And I don't think that if I didn't love it, would I still be doing it?
Yeah, I know. I saw so many videos of your work, and it really does show the genuineness of it all. And someone had asked, especially on YouTube, when I saw you have 1.9 million subscribers, and someone said, "How did you manage people recognizing you in real life, if it has occurred?"
Yeah, fortunately, I've had all very positive experiences. I've had people come up to me and tell me how grateful they are for my content and how much they enjoy it. And it's actually really not been a problem. Certainly, you worry about safety when you're on social media. And I think just as a general rule, if the concern is real safety, is I never share my location in real time. I never share what I'm doing in real time. I'll share it after the fact, just for safety purposes. But ultimately, I think it's not been a problem. Sure, could it be? In any case, yes, but I really haven't had much of an issue. It's all been really positive.
That's so good to hear, having those like safety barriers just in case and boundaries.
Mhm.
Okay. Our next question says, as a doctor with your own practice, how do you manage consultations and appointments with any serious requests versus fans?
Yeah, so I mean, I can't give medical information online. I would generally recommend not doing that. I think that's generally frowned upon by the medical boards, at least in the United States. So you should not be giving medical information online. And that's again where those disclaimers come in that we talked about earlier. And so, in terms of fans asking individual medical questions, I can't answer them. And I tell them very honestly that I can't give medical advice online. I won't be answering those questions. If you want to see me, there is a way to do so. You can go on my website, you can make an appointment with me. And if you're not in a state where I'm licensed in, we can do a general educational visit where I can provide educational information to you, but I cannot give you a diagnosis or a treatment or give you any sort of care that would be developing a patient physician relationship. And so again, I think that's pretty clear cut in terms of you really shouldn't be doing any online medical information without creating a formal relationship or just providing general educational content.
Awesome. Thank you for making that clear. Our next question says, what are your best practices for creating short-term videos or short-form videos?
Short form videos. Oh, so a lot of times I will take clips from my long form content to make short form videos. Otherwise, I will sort of take little questions that are sort of answerable in less than a minute, and I will make a quick answer to those on short forms. Sometimes I'll see a trend that's going on, and I'll be like, oh, I can make content that's related to urology based on this trend. And so sometimes I'll do that. And so, yeah, it's really whatever you feel like doing. I think Shorts is a great place to experiment with different types of content. And so, really, you can do anything you want and take inspiration from people around you because there's so much that people are doing. But ultimately, don't try to be someone else. Always be yourself and do what seems natural to you. I've been very honest in general that I don't love making short content because I feel like it leaves a lot of information on the table, right? You can only get so much in 60 seconds. So you have to be able to answer a quick question, but it can't be as in depth as something like going over a treatment that has benefits and risks. And, so I think you have to be thoughtful in if you give a short nugget of information, if people just see that short nugget, are they getting a biased type of information.
Yes, that's so good. Someone in the chat has asked, can you talk a little bit about your creative process and do you use scripts?
Yeah, so my creative process is that I generally come up with ideas or look at my audience's comments, or from whatever inspiration comes to me, like where I'm thinking about something, or I've where patients ask me questions, or people ask me questions, or my husband asks me a question. I'm like, oh, that's a great idea for a video. Or I'll search, again, I'll always go back to YouTube and say, like, what are people talking about, and what is important to cover in a medical way, to debunk some misinformation. And so I sort of get ideas, I keep them in a specific place, and then I sort of put them on a calendar. And so so I don't have to think about what video am I making next week. It's always on the calendar. And then I say, okay, I'm going to start researching that topic. So then I'll go into PubMed, Google Scholar, start researching articles on the topic, and then that will be one day of like researching and sort of note taking or script writing, depending on the complexity of the topic. If the topic is really complex, I may write a full script, because it's going to be hard for me to go through each of it individually with bullet points. Most often I like to just use note points, or bullet points, and make sure I sort of cover each of those bullet points. And then when I record, this is another tip, is I don't record in one sitting. So I'll record a topic, a part of the video, I'll pause, I'll reset, and then I'll make the next part of the video, because that allows you to sort of bring that energy to every part of your video, and also make sure that you're covering each of your bullet points.
Yes, that's so good. Okay, and then our next question, it says, do you have any suggestions for advertising when it comes to your content?
Yeah, I've always done organic growth. I think I've not advertised on any social media platform, but I think collaboration is a great way to advertise yourself. And so things like this, like I'm working with Osmosis and we're talking together. And so hopefully their audience will see this and my audience will see this, and we'll be able to collaborate and grow that way. So I think that's a wonderful way to grow yourself, and then just keep creating content on different social media platforms. And that helps people find you and say, oh, she's on YouTube. Let me go on YouTube and watch some of her stuff. And so I think that's another way to help advertise yourself if you want to focus on organic growth.
Okay, that's awesome. And then for our last question, I know you mentioned previously about your course. So is there any points that you'd like to share with the community audience right now?
Yeah, so we are launching a course that is sponsored by YouTube Health, that's going to be covering, how to build your brand and how to make social media content with video, and so that will be coming in the next few days or weeks. Don't know the exact launch date yet, but keep an eye out. We'll put a link in the description, so that you guys can find it, or follow me on YouTube or subscribe to my channel, and you'll see it there when it gets launched. And we'll obviously have some promotion around the course as well on Osmosis and on our end. So yeah, we'll have a course, and it really goes into sort of more of the nitty gritty of like creating content, what equipment to use, how, why building your brand is important and what that means. And then I think ultimately it can be really helpful. It's completely free. So no cost associated with it. We're doing it completely free, and we'd love to create more content around it. So let us know what questions you have, because we want to help people create content that's evidence-based, that's helpful to people to learn their health and to be advocates for their own health. So if you guys have questions, we're always happy to help you learn to create content and to make it as seamless as possible, and learn from all the things that we've done over the years to help you become really successful content creators.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering all these questions. I really do appreciate it. You're from Osmosis. And yeah, if anyone has any last questions, be sure to add them into the comments or the live chat. And we'll be adding the course website in the comments as well for this live stream. Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you, Osmosis. Thank you, Emily. And it's been a true honor to be here. And again, thank you to YouTube Health for sponsoring this event. We are so pleased to be working with them and doing this so we can help more creators create content online.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you much. Thank you so much, you guys. Everyone in the chat. And yes, thank you so much, Rena Malik. Okay, guys. Yeah, new live stream now.